The dust of the Texas plains whirled and stung like 1,000 tiny needles against Zara Nelson's tear-streaked face as she collapsed onto the hard ground. Her hopes scattered like the remnants of her family's wagon train. The year was 1875, and the promise of a new life in California had evaporated with the summer rain, leaving nothing but the bitter taste of betrayal and loneliness. Zara's once pristine blue dress was torn and soiled, her dark hair falling in tangled waves around her shoulders as she wept. The band of travelers she had joined after her parents' death had abandoned her at the trading post when she couldn't pay her share after thieves stole her money pouch during the night. At 22, she found herself alone in the unforgiving wilderness of the Texas frontier with nothing but the clothes on her back and a small locket containing a faded photograph of her parents. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered through her sobs. She didn't care anymore. The elements, bandits, or wild animals, whatever fate awaited her, seemed preferable to the crushing weight of abandonment. "Miss, are you hurt?" The deep, concerned voice cut through her despair. Zara looked up through tear-blurred vision to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. A man dismounted from his horse, his movements fluid and practiced. As he came closer, she could make out his features, a strong jawline partially hidden beneath several days' worth of stubble, concerned blue eyes beneath the brim of a well-worn Stetson, and shoulders broadened by years of hard labor. "They left me," she whispered, her voice cracking. "They took everything and left me here to die." The cowboy crouched down before her, removing his hat to reveal sandy brown hair. His expression softened as he took in her disheveled appearance. "I'm Frank Miller," he said gently, "ranch foreman at the Triple Creek spread about 5 miles west of here." He offered her his canteen. "Drink. The water's clean." Zara hesitated before accepting it, taking small, grateful sips. "What's your name, miss?" he asked. "Zara Nelson," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I was traveling to California with the Harmon wagon train, but they abandoned me when thieves took my money." Frank's jaw tightened with barely contained anger. "People can be crueler than the land sometimes," he said, "and that's saying something in these parts." He stood, extending a calloused hand to her. "You'll never be left again," the cowboy said with such conviction that fresh tears welled in Zara's eyes. "I can take you to the ranch. Mrs. Hollister, the owner's wife, she's always looking for help with the housekeeping. You'll have food and a roof until you figure out your next move." Zara stared at his outstretched hand, suspicion warring with desperate hope. "Why would you help me?" "You don't know anything about me." Frank's smile was small but genuine. "Out here, we help folks in need or nobody survives. That's just the way it is." He shrugged. "Besides, I know enough you're in trouble and I can do something about it. That's all that matters right now." After a moment's hesitation, Zara placed her hand in his and allowed him to help her to her feet. Her legs wobbled from exhaustion and hunger. "When's the last time you ate?" Frank asked, steadying her. "Yesterday morning," she admitted. Without another word, Frank reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a cloth-wrapped package. "It's just jerky and hardtack, but it'll keep you going until we reach the ranch." As Zara ate the simple food, Frank checked his horse and adjusted the saddle. "Can you ride?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. "My father taught me." Frank nodded and helped her mount before swinging up behind her. The closeness made her stiffen, but there was nothing improper in the way he held the reins, keeping a respectful distance while ensuring she wouldn't fall. As they rode toward Triple Creek Ranch, the last light of day faded from the sky, and Zara found herself leaning back against the solid warmth of Frank's chest, too exhausted to maintain her rigid posture. Perhaps it was foolish to trust a stranger, but something in his straightforward manner and the kindness in his eyes told her she was safe with him. "Rest if you need to," he said softly. "I've got you." For the first time in days, Zara closed her eyes without fear. The Triple Creek Ranch sprawled across the valley, a collection of sturdy wooden buildings surrounding a two-story main house. Even in the pre-dawn light, Zara could see it was a prosperous operation, with well-maintained corrals and a large barn. Several cowboys were already up and moving about, preparing for the day's work. Frank guided his horse to the main house and dismounted before helping Zara down. Her muscles protested after the long ride, and she stumbled slightly as her feet touched the ground. "Easy there," Frank said, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. The front door opened, spilling warm lamplight onto the porch. A woman in her 50s stood there, her gray-streaked hair pulled into a neat bun, sharp eyes taking in the scene. "Frank Miller, what have you brought home this time?" she asked, though her tone held more curiosity than disapproval. "Mrs. Hollister, this is Miss Zara Nelson," Frank explained. "Found her abandoned at Coyote Crossing. The Harmon wagon train left her behind when thieves took her money." Mrs. Hollister's expression softened immediately. "Those heartless fools. Come in, child. You look about ready to fall over." The interior of the house was warm and smelled of coffee and freshly baked bread. Zara followed Mrs. Hollister to the kitchen, aware of Frank hovering protectively behind her. "Sit," Mrs. Hollister instructed, pointing to a chair at the large wooden table. "I'll fix you something to eat." "Thank you for your kindness," Zara said, her voice small. "I don't want to be a burden." Mrs. Hollister waved away her concerns. "Nonsense. No one's a burden who's willing to work, and I suspect you are." She set a plate of eggs and bread before Zara. "Eat now and we'll talk after." Frank cleared his throat. "I'd best get to the herd. Thompson and Riley are waiting on my instructions for the day." "Go on then," Mrs. Hollister said. "I'll look after Miss Nelson." He nodded, but hesitated before leaving, his eyes meeting Zara's. "You're safe here," he assured her. "Mrs. Hollister runs this place tighter than a cavalry outpost." "Thank you," Zara said sincerely, "for everything." A hint of color touched Frank's tan cheeks. "Just did what anyone would," he muttered before ducking out the door. Mrs. Hollister chuckled as she poured Zara a cup of coffee. "That boy's been working for us since he was 17. Best foreman we've ever had. But he still gets flustered around a pretty face." Zara felt heat rise to her own cheeks. "He was very kind to me." "That he is," Mrs. Hollister agreed. "Now tell me your story, child, and don't leave anything out." Over the next hour, Zara explained how she'd lost her parents to fever the previous year in St. Louis. With no other family, she decided to use her modest inheritance to seek a new beginning in California, joining the Harmon wagon train for safety. When thieves stole her money pouch at the trading post, Gerald Harmon had coldly informed her she could no longer travel with them without contributing to provisions. "They left while I was begging for work at the trading post," Zara finished, staring into her empty cup. "The shopkeeper's wife said they'd need help at a place called Red Valley, but it was a 3-day walk. I tried to follow the road, but I got disoriented in the heat." Mrs. Hollister's face was a mask of controlled anger. "Gerald Harmon is known in these parts for his business sense, but not his charity. Still, to leave a young woman alone." She shook her head. "Well, their loss is our gain. I've been needing help with the house and the cooking. My arthritis makes it harder every year, and the ranch hands are useless with anything more complicated than coffee." "You're offering me work?" Zara asked, hope blossoming in her chest. "Room, board, and $10 a month," Mrs. Hollister confirmed. "It's not much, but you can save toward whatever future you're seeking." "I accept," Zara said quickly. "And I'm a hard worker, Mrs. Hollister. My mother taught me to cook and keep house properly." The older woman smiled. "I believe you are, child. Now let's find you some clean clothes and show you to your room. You need rest before you start your duties. The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window overlooking the corral. After washing and changing into a borrowed dress that was slightly too large, Zara fell into a deep, dreamless sleep, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion in the safety of Triple Creek Ranch. Over the next 2 weeks, Zara settled into life at the ranch. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Hollister prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, learned the rhythm of the household chores, and gradually regained her strength and confidence. The owner of the ranch, Mr. Thomas Hollister, was a gruff but fair man who left the running of the household entirely to his wife. Frank Miller remained a constant, if somewhat distant, presence. He tipped his hat to her each morning as he came in for breakfast, inquired after her well-being, and occasionally brought her wildflowers he'd found while riding the range. His kindness was steady and undemanding, and Zara found herself looking forward to their brief interactions. One evening, as Zara hung laundry in the yard, Frank approached her, leading his horse. "Miss Nelson," he greeted her. "How are you finding life at Triple Creek?" "Much better than crying in the dust," she replied with a small smile. "Mrs. Hollister has been very kind to me." Frank nodded, fidgeting with his horse's reins. "I'm glad to hear it." He paused, seeming to gather his courage. "I was wondering if you might like to join me for a ride on Sunday afternoon? After church services? There's a nice spot by the creek I thought you might enjoy seeing." Zara felt a flutter of nervous excitement. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Miller." His smile transformed his face, softening the weathered lines and bringing a warmth to his blue eyes. "I'll look forward to it then." Sunday arrived clear and bright. After attending the small church in the nearby town of Willow Springs with the Hollisters, Zara changed into a riding skirt Mrs. Hollister had altered for her and met Frank by the stables. He had 2 horses ready, his own chestnut gelding and a gentle-looking Palomino mare. "This is Buttercup," he said, patting the mare's neck. "She's steady as they come." Zara approached the horse, stroking her velvety nose. "She's beautiful." "Not as beautiful as her rider," Frank said quietly, then immediately looked as though he regretted his boldness. Zara felt her cheeks warm but smiled at the compliment. "Thank you, Mr. Miller." "Frank," he corrected. "Please call me Frank." "Frank," she repeated. "And I'm Zara." He helped her mount, his hands strong and respectful on her waist, then swung up onto his own horse. They rode at an easy pace through green pastures dotted with grazing cattle, Frank pointing out landmarks and sharing stories of life on the ranch. "How did you come to work for the Hollisters?" Zara asked as they followed the winding path of a creek lined with cottonwood trees. Frank's expression grew contemplative. "I was a wild young buck after the war. My pa died at Gettysburg, and my ma couldn't handle me anymore. I was headed for trouble drinking, fighting, running with a rough crowd." He shook his head at the memory. "One night I got into a brawl in town, and Mr. Hollister happened to be there. Instead of letting the sheriff lock me up, he offered me a job." "That was fortunate," Zara observed. "It saved my life," Frank said simply. "He worked me so hard I couldn't get into trouble, and Mrs. Hollister treated me like the son they never had. Taught me responsibility, respect, how to be a man instead of just an angry boy." They reached a small clearing beside the creek where a massive old oak tree provided shade. Frank dismounted and helped Zara down, then retrieved a bundle from his saddlebag. "Mrs. Hollister packed us some food," he explained, spreading a blanket on the ground. They sat together in the dappled shade, eating cold chicken and fresh bread, talking easily about their lives. Zara told him about growing up in St. Louis, her father's work as a clockmaker, her mother's dreams of seeing California someday. "And you?" Frank asked. Do you still want to go to California? Zara paused, considering the question. I don't know anymore, she admitted. It was never really my dream, just something to do after my parents died. I needed a purpose, a destination. Frank nodded, understanding. And now I'm just grateful to have found kind people and honest work, she said. The future seems less frightening. They fell into comfortable silence, listening to the bubbling creek and the rustle of leaves overhead. Without thinking, Zara reached out and touched Frank's hand where it rested on the blanket. Thank you, she said softly, for finding me that day. His fingers curled around hers, warm and strong. I'm the one who should be thanking Providence, he said, his voice low. Finding you crying in that dust might be the best thing that ever happened to me. The sincerity in his eyes made Zara's heart skip. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Frank leaned forward and brushed his lips against hers in a kiss so gentle it was barely more than a whisper. When he pulled back, his expression was questioning, uncertain. Zara answered by leaning forward and returning his kiss. A simple, sweet connection that promised possibilities neither had dared hope for just weeks before. As summer progressed into fall, Zara and Frank's Sunday afternoon rides became a cherished ritual. Sometimes they rode to the creek, other times to the high ridge that overlooked the valley, and occasionally into town for ice cream at the general store. With each outing, their connection deepened, built on shared conversations, gentle touches, and increasingly passionate kisses. Life at Triple Creek settled into a comfortable routine. Zara had proven herself invaluable to Mrs. Hollister, taking over more responsibilities as the older woman's arthritis worsened. The ranch hands respected her, and Mr. Hollister had even increased her wages after the first month, impressed with her efficiency and cooking. One crisp October evening, as Zara finished washing the dinner dishes, a commotion outside drew her attention. Wiping her hands on her apron, she went to the door just as one of the young cowboys burst in. Mrs. Hollister, Miss Nelson, it's Frank, he's been hurt. Zara's heart plummeted. What happened? She demanded, already reaching for her shawl. Rustlers, the young man panted. They hit the north pasture. Frank caught them branding one of our calves. There was shooting. He took one in the shoulder. Mrs. Hollister moved with surprising speed for her age, gathering bandages and her box of medicinal supplies. Where is he? They're bringing him in now. Doc Jenkins has been sent for, but he's over at the Peterson place delivering a baby. Zara rushed outside to see several cowboys supporting Frank as they helped him from his horse. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale beneath his tan, but his eyes found hers immediately. It's not as bad as it looks, he tried to assure her, though his grimace of pain betrayed him. Get him to his cabin, Mrs. Hollister ordered. Zara, bring hot water and clean towels. Frank's cabin was small but neat, reflecting the orderly nature of its occupant. The cowboys helped him onto his bed while Zara hurried to heat water on his small stove. Mrs. Hollister carefully cut away his bloody shirt to reveal an angry wound high on his left shoulder. Clean through, she pronounced after examination. Missed the bone, thank the Lord. You're lucky, Frank Miller. Doesn't feel lucky, he muttered through gritted teeth. It will when you're not dead, Mrs. Hollister replied tartly. Zara, help me clean this wound. The rest of you boys back to work. And tell Mr. Hollister to organize a proper search party for those rustlers. Alone with Frank and Mrs. Hollister, Zara focused on following instructions, trying to ignore the way her hands trembled as she helped wash away the blood from Frank's wound. He endured the painful cleaning stoically, but when Mrs. Hollister poured whiskey over the injury to sterilize it, he couldn't suppress a sharp cry. Without thinking, Zara took his hand in hers, letting him squeeze it through the worst of the pain. Their eyes met, and despite his agony, Frank managed a small smile for her. "Doc Jenkins will stitch this properly when he arrives," Mrs. Hollister said, applying a poultice of herbs and bandaging the wound. "But this should keep infection at bay until then." She gathered her supplies and paused at the door. "Zara, perhaps you could stay with him until the doctor comes? I need to speak with Mr. Hollister about what happened." "Of course," Zara agreed quickly. Once they were alone, Frank released a shaky breath. "You shouldn't have to see me like this," he said. Zara sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I'm exactly where I want to be," she assured him, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Those rustlers," he said, anger flashing in his eyes. "They were professionals. Had a whole operation set up in that North Canyon. They'd already taken half a dozen calves. Did you recognize any of them?" Frank nodded grimly. "One of them was Jed Blackburn. Used to ride for the Circle M until Mr. Monroe caught him stealing. He swore he'd get even someday. What happened to the rustlers?" "I winged one of them, I think. They scattered when I started shooting. Left their equipment behind." He shifted, wincing at the movement. "The boys will track them." Zara poured a glass of water and helped him drink. "You should rest," she advised, though she knew Frank well enough by now to expect his stubbornness. "Can't rest while those thieves are still out there," he insisted, trying to sit up. "You won't be much help to anyone if you bleed to death," she countered, gently but firmly pressing him back against the pillows. "Mr. Hollister has things well in hand." Frank relented, sinking back with a sigh. After a moment of silence, he reached for her hand. "Zara," he said, his voice serious, "I need to tell you something in case—" "Don't," she interrupted. "You're not dying, Frank Miller. It's just a shoulder wound." "Even so," he persisted, "I need you to know that I love you." His blue eyes held hers steadily despite the pain he must have been feeling. "I think I've loved you since I found you crying in the dust. And if something ever happens to me, I want you to remember that." Tears welled in Zara's eyes. "Nothing is going to happen to you," she insisted. "And I love you too. So you have to get better, because I'm not letting you go now that I've found you." His smile was tender despite his pallor. "Is that a promise, Miss Nelson?" "It is, Mr. Miller," she confirmed, leaning down to place a gentle kiss on his lips. When Dr. Jenkins finally arrived, he confirmed Mrs. Hollister's assessment: the bullet had passed cleanly through muscle without hitting bone or vital organs. He stitched the wound, prescribed rest, and warned against infection, but assured them that Frank should make a full recovery. The next few days were difficult. Fever set in despite their precautions, and for one terrifying night, Zara and Mrs. Hollister took turns bathing Frank's burning skin with cool cloths as he tossed in delirious dreams, sometimes calling out for Zara, sometimes reliving battles from his youth. By morning, the fever broke, and Frank opened clear eyes to find Zara dozing in a chair beside his bed, her hand still holding his. The sight filled his heart with such overwhelming love that he knew, without a doubt, what he needed to do once he was recovered. 2 weeks later, Frank was well enough to resume light duties around the ranch. The rustlers had been caught by a posse led by Mr. Hollister, and the local sheriff Jed Blackburn and 3 other men were now in jail awaiting trial. Life returned to normal at Triple Creek, but something had changed between Zara and Frank. Their feelings, declared during a moment of crisis, hung in the air between them, acknowledged but not fully explored in the busy days of Frank's recovery. On the first Sunday Frank was cleared to ride again, he asked Zara to accompany him to their special spot by the creek. The November air was crisp, but the sun provided warmth as they spread a blanket beneath the now nearly leafless oak tree. "I've been doing a lot of thinking while I was laid up," Frank began, his usually confident manner tinged with nervousness. "That sounds dangerous," Zara teased gently. He laughed, relaxing slightly. Maybe so. He took her hands in his. Zara, when I found you that day, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. I was content before I had good work, good people around me, a purpose. But I never knew what was missing until you came along. Zara's heart began to race as Frank reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. This was my mother's, he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl. It's not fancy, but it was given with love, just like I'm giving it to you now. He slid from the blanket onto one knee before her. Zara Nelson, would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? Tears of joy spilled down Zara's cheeks. Yes, she whispered, then louder. Yes, Frank Miller, I will marry you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit as though it had been made for her. Then he gathered her into his arms, kissing her with all the passion and promise of their future together. When they returned to the ranch, Mrs. Hollister took one look at them and broke into a wide smile. Well, it's about time, she declared, hugging them both. I was beginning to think I'd have to lock you two in the root cellar until you came to your senses. Mr. Hollister shook Frank's hand firmly. You've chosen well, son, he said, then surprised everyone by adding gruffly. Your cabin's too small for a married couple. We'll start building you a proper house after the wedding. Sir, that's too generous, Frank protested. Nonsense. Mr. Hollister dismissed his objection. Consider it an investment in the future of Triple Creek. You're the best foreman this ranch has ever seen, and Miss Nelson here has become indispensable. We want you both to stay on. Zara and Frank exchanged glances filled with joy and gratitude. Thank you, sir, Frank said sincerely. We accept. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Springs. The entire ranch turned out for the celebration, along with most of the townspeople who had come to know and respect both Frank and Zara. Mrs. Hollister had insisted on making Zara a proper wedding dress, and Frank looked uncommonly handsome in a new suit purchased for the occasion. As they exchanged vows before the minister, Zara could scarcely believe how much her life had changed in just a few months. From the depths of despair, crying in the dust of a deserted trading post, to this moment of perfect happiness, all because a kind-hearted cowboy had stopped to help a stranger in need. The wedding feast lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing in the ranch's main barn, decorated with lanterns and fall flowers for the occasion. As the night grew late, Frank led his new bride to the foreman's cabin, which Mrs. Hollister had helped Zara prepare with fresh curtains, new bedding, and small touches that made it feel like a home. Welcome home, Mrs. Miller, Frank said softly as he carried her across the threshold. Zara wrapped her arms around his neck, overwhelmed with love for this good, steady man. I never thought I could be this happy, she confessed. I promised you'd never be left again, he reminded her, setting her gently on her feet. And I intend to keep that promise every day for the rest of our lives. In the candlelit warmth of the small cabin, they came together as husband and wife, their passion tempered with tenderness, each touch a promise of devotion that would only grow stronger with time. Spring came early to Triple Creek Ranch in 1876. The new house that Mr. Hollister had promised was nearly complete, a comfortable 4-room structure with a wide front porch and plenty of space for a family to grow. Frank had insisted on doing much of the work himself, despite his duties as foreman, often working late into the evening by lantern light. Zara stood on the porch of their soon-to-be home, watching as Frank and 2 other cowboys fitted the last window. Her hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, a secret joy she had only discovered the week before and had yet to share with her husband. As though sensing her thoughts, Frank looked up and caught her watching him. His face broke into the warm smile that still made her heart flutter after months of marriage. He said something to his companions and made his way over to her. "What do you think?" he asked, gesturing to the house. "Will it do for the lady of the manor?" Zara laughed. "It's perfect, and you know it. Though I'm hardly a lady, and this is certainly not a manor." "It's our home," Frank said, pulling her into his arms. "And you are the most beautiful, gracious lady I've ever known." She leaned against him, savoring the solid strength of his chest against her cheek. "Frank," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He drew back slightly to look at her face. "What is it, love?" Zara took his hand and placed it gently on her stomach. "We're going to need that extra room sooner than we thought." For a moment, Frank stared at her in confusion. Then understanding dawned in his eyes. "Are you saying we're having a baby?" His voice was filled with wonder. Zara nodded, tears of happiness glistening in her eyes. "In the fall. Dr. Jenkins confirmed it yesterday when I went into town." With a whoop of joy that startled the nearby horses, Frank lifted her off her feet and spun her in a circle. "A baby!" he exclaimed. "Our baby! Frank Miller, put me down this instant." Zara laughed, though she was equally elated by his reaction. He set her down gently, then dropped to his knees before her, placing both hands on her stomach with reverence. "Hello in there," he said softly. "I'm your pa, and I promise you'll have the best ma in the whole territory." Zara stroked his hair, her heart so full it felt it might burst. "And the best pa too," she added. Frank stood and kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and joy into the embrace. When they parted, both were breathless and smiling. "We should celebrate," he declared. "Let's ride into town for dinner at the hotel. I want to show off my beautiful wife." "I'd like that," Zara agreed. "But first I think we should tell the Hollisters. They've been like family to us." The news was received with delight by Mrs. Hollister, who immediately began planning for the baby's arrival, and with gruff congratulations from Mr. Hollister, who surprised them by announcing he would be adding a nursery to their new house as his gift to them. Life at Triple Creek continued its steady rhythm as Zara's pregnancy progressed. Frank became even more protective, insisting on doing the heavier household chores and watching her like a hawk whenever she went about her duties. Mrs. Hollister finally took him aside and told him firmly that women had been having babies since the beginning of time, and hovering over Zara like she was made of china wasn't helping anyone. After that, he tried to give her more space, though Zara often caught him watching her with a mixture of love and concern that melted her heart. They moved into their new house in June, and Zara took great pleasure in making it a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, arranged the furniture Frank had either built or purchased for them, and spent hours in the nursery, preparing for their child's arrival. One hot August afternoon, as Zara rested on the porch enjoying the slight breeze, she spotted a group of riders approaching the ranch. It wasn't unusual to have visitors, but something about this group made her uneasy. As they drew closer, she recognized the lead rider with a shock that sent her heart racing. Gerald Harmon, the wagon train leader who had abandoned her months ago. Frank was out with the cattle, and Mr. Hollister had ridden into town on business. Zara rose awkwardly, her advanced pregnancy making quick movements difficult, and went inside to find Mrs. Hollister. "The Harmon wagon train is here," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Gerald Harmon is leading them." Mrs. Hollister's face hardened. "That man has some nerve showing his face around here," she said grimly. "Stay inside, Zara. I'll handle this." "No," Zara said firmly. "I need to face him myself." Mrs. Hollister studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. But I'll be right beside you." They returned to the porch just as the riders reached the main house. Gerald Harmon, a tall man with a severe face partially hidden beneath a thick beard, dismounted and approached them, removing his hat. "Mrs. Hollister," he greeted the older woman. "It's been some time." Not long enough, Mr. Harmon, Mrs. Hollister replied coldly. What brings you to Triple Creek? Harmon's eyes shifted to Zara, widening slightly at her evident pregnancy. Miss Nelson, he said, his tone betraying surprise. I see you've landed on your feet. It's Mrs. Miller now. Zara corrected him, her voice steady despite the anger and residual fear this man inspired in her. I see, Harmon said, looking uncomfortable. Well, congratulations are in order then. Is there something you wanted, Mr. Harmon? Mrs. Hollister pressed. We're quite busy here. Harmon cleared his throat. We're heading back east after a disappointing venture in California. I was hoping to purchase supplies and perhaps rest our animals for a day or two. Before either woman could respond, the sound of galloping hooves announced Frank's arrival. He must have been alerted by one of the hands about the visitors. He dismounted in a fluid motion and strode purposefully toward them, his expression thunderous as he recognized Harmon. Frank, Zara said, moving to his side and placing a restraining hand on his arm. She could feel the tension in his muscles. What's he doing here? Frank demanded, his voice low with controlled anger. Zara quickly explained the situation, keeping her hand firmly on Frank's arm. Frank's jaw worked as he struggled with his temper. Finally, he addressed Harmon directly. You abandoned my wife when she needed help. Left her to die in the dust without a second thought. Harmon had the grace to look ashamed. It was a business decision, Miller. We couldn't afford to carry someone who couldn't contribute. A business decision? Frank repeated incredulously. She's a human being, not a ledger entry. Frank, Zara said softly, it's all right. What he did led me to you, to this life. I wouldn't change that now. Her words seemed to reach him, and some of the tension left his body. He covered her hand with his own, drawing strength from her touch. You can purchase supplies in town, Harmon, he said finally. Willow Springs is just 5 miles east. But you're not welcome to stay at Triple Creek. Gerald Harmon's face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Now see here, Miller. No, you see here. Frank cut him off. My wife has found it in her heart to forgive what you did. But I'm not so charitable. If you're not off Triple Creek land in the next 10 minutes, I'll have the boys escort you off, and they won't be gentle about it. For a moment, it seemed Harmon might argue further, but something in Frank's steady gaze must have convinced him otherwise. He jammed his hat back on his head and turned to his companions. Mount up, he ordered. We'll try our luck in town. As the group rode away, Frank put his arm around Zara's shoulders. Are you all right? He asked gently. She nodded, leaning against him. Better than all right. Seeing him now, it's like looking at a different life. One that could have been mine if you hadn't found me that day. You two make a fine pair, Mrs. Hollister observed with approval. Now come inside before this heat gets any worse. That baby doesn't need to be baked before it's even born. They laughed and followed her inside, the encounter with Harmon already fading like a bad dream in the light of their happiness. Frederick Thomas Miller was born on a cool September evening after a difficult but ultimately successful labor. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's dark hair, and both parents were instantly besotted with him. He's perfect, Frank whispered, cradling his son with a mixture of awe and terror at how small and vulnerable he seemed. How did we make something so perfect? Zara, exhausted but radiant, smiled at the sight of her husband and son together. With love, she answered simply, and perhaps a touch of divine intervention. As fall gave way to winter, the Millers settled into life as a family of 3. Little Freddie, as they called him, thrived under the devoted attention of his parents and the extended family of the ranch. Mrs. Hollister proclaimed herself his honorary grandmother and spoiled him shamelessly, while Mr. Hollister carved him wooden toys that would last a lifetime. On the first anniversary of the day Frank had found Zara crying in the dust, he surprised her with a special gift, a silver locket to replace the worn one containing her parents' photographs. "Open it," he urged, watching her face expectantly. Inside were two tiny portraits, one of Frank holding Freddie, and one of Zara's parents that he had carefully copied from her original locket. "So you can keep all your family close to your heart," he explained as tears filled her eyes. "It's beautiful," she whispered, throwing her arms around his neck. "Thank you." As he held her, Frank reflected on how much had changed in just 1 year. He had stopped to help a stranger in distress and found the love of his life, a partnership more fulfilling than he could have imagined, and now a son to carry their legacy forward. "I told you you'd never be left again," he murmured into her hair. "And I meant every word." "I know," Zara replied, leaning back to look into his eyes. "And I never will be. We built something wonderful together, Frank. Something that will last." Outside their window, the Texas sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a fitting backdrop to their love story, a story that had begun in dust and tears, but blossomed into joy and promise on the wild frontier they now called home. As the years passed, Triple Creek Ranch prospered under Frank's management. Freddie grew into a strong, kind-hearted boy who loved the ranch as much as his parents did. When he was 4, he welcomed a baby sister, Elizabeth, and named after both grandmothers. In 1885, 10 years after Frank had found Zara crying in the dust, Mr. Hollister called them into the main house one evening after the children were asleep. "Sarah and I have been talking," he began, indicating Mrs. Hollister beside him. "We're not getting any younger, and neither of us has family to leave the ranch to." Frank and Zara exchanged curious glances. "What we do have," Mrs. Hollister continued, "is you too. You've become the children we never had, and those grandchildren of ours are the light of our lives." Mr. Hollister cleared his throat, emotion making his voice gruffer than usual. "We want to make you partners in Triple Creek now, with the understanding that when we're gone, it all passes to you and the children." Frank was stunned. "Mr. Hollister, we can't possibly accept." "You can and you will," the older man interrupted firmly. "You've put your heart and soul into this place, Frank, and Zara has made it a home for all of us. There's no one else we'd trust with our legacy." Overcome with emotion, Zara moved to embrace Mrs. Hollister while Frank shook Mr. Hollister's hand. Too moved for words. Later that night, as they lay in bed discussing the unexpected turn of events, Frank pulled Zara close against his chest. "Did you ever imagine, when I found you that day, that this would be our life?" he asked, his voice soft in the darkness. Zara snuggled closer, her head resting on his shoulder in the familiar position they had perfected over years of marriage. "Never," she admitted. "I was just hoping to survive another day. And now look at us, 2 children, a partnership in one of the finest ranches in the territory, and still madly in love after all these years." Zara lifted her head to kiss him softly. "Especially that last part," she murmured against his lips. "Especially that," he agreed, deepening the kiss. Outside their window, the stars shone down on Triple Creek Ranch, bearing witness to a love that had begun with a promise made in the dust and had only grown stronger with each passing day, a promise that would never be broken, not in this lifetime or beyond.